So if we are having the deepest heartbreak of our life, we've experienced tremendous grief, loss, disappointment. To jump from that devastating pain to happiness is kind of a leap. And possibility, I feel like feels more doable. There is a possibility that we will have an expanded perspective. And that is what lights me up.
Hi, welcome to Guiding Light. I'm Jenna Carson.
I'm Sierra Larson.
We are so excited for you to hear this episode with special guest Melissa Lago. She talks about moving from pain to possibility. So, whatever you're going through, whether it's trauma, shame, grief, all of this runs together, and you can find possibility in your life right now. So, stay tuned, and we want to hear what you think. So, let us know. Melissa Lago is a teacher and researcher who founded Yoga Transforms Us to facilitate transformation from the inside out. She earned her Master of Divinity degree from Harvard, where her research centered on bringing together yoga, spiritual care, and chaplaincy to support people in building resilience. In 2022, she joined the Wisdom Traditions Department at Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado, where she teaches courses in their Yoga Studies and Master of Divinity programs. She also teaches publicly and privately in Boulder, online, and at retreat centers in the Colorado Rockies. Melissa, we are thrilled to have you with us today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful to be on this podcast.
You and I met at Harvard, and that was almost 10 years ago, Melissa. Can you believe
Um,
that?
yeah, I know. I was thinking about it. It was so long ago.
And sometimes it feels like just yesterday. And I get these flashbacks from my time there with you and just remember a woman so grounded, so spiritual, living in this like elevated consciousness mindset, very much embodying the practice of yoga, not just talking about it. And I observed even Chaplain Carrie Maloney complimenting you and saying she could tell you were living the practice. And so I'd like to start out by asking, how do you stay so grounded in your spiritual practice when we live in such a distracted world?
I love that question. And thank you so much, Jenna. I just remember you as such a bright light at Harvard. And I love that that's the name of yours and Sierra's podcast, Guiding Light, because it just feels so right. So I love that question of what helps me to stay grounded. And I would say it is really connecting to my heart. Like when I distill it, all the practices and all the readings and all the beautiful people that I feel like I'm learning from and growing, and my students, it's really staying in the heart center. I feel like when I center my focus on my heart, and that's my question to myself, am I living from my heart or am I living from my head? That's the question that's most powerful for me.
How would you teach people how to live from the heart? Like, say somebody has never heard of that before, this distinction between the head and the heart.
Yeah.
And ironically, actually, the heart now is being called in some circles the second brain because the heart can actually feel pain. And it's incredible, but that's a topic for another day. So the question for you is, yeah, how would you explain that? What's the difference between living from the heart versus the head?
Yeah, that's another great question. So for me, I feel like if I ground in my body, so even right now, feeling my sit bones on my chair, feeling my back supported, it's really tuning into the body so that my head, I'm someone that certainly has had a lot of anxiety. It's one of the things that brought me to yoga as a young person, and I'm still young, but when I was in high school, I went to prep school. It was really intense academically, and I feel like that's where sort of resourcing in the body helped me, and I would say that that's true now too. It's really first making contact with my body. That's why I love yoga, and then from that place my mind gets quieter, and then I can kind of check in. I feel like the organ of the heart is like the intuitive organ. It's the organ where you feel that sense of, yes, instead of confusion or kind of that churning that the nature of the mind does. So I think for me, it is first grounding in the body, breathing, and then checking in. Does this feel like it's coming from a grounded place of yes versus a lot of confusion or spinning?
Absolutely. You're reminding me of the book, The Body Keeps the Score
Yes.
by Dr. Bessel Vanderkolk.
Vanderkolk.
Vanderkolk. Mhm. I think each of us has read that book, right? Sierra, Melissa, we've all read that book.
Yes.
Yeah. So the body can't lie to us. Like when something's off, we feel it.
Mhm.
Like our heart has that confusion. And so I love how you're pointing out this groundedness in your body as the place to start. And really, we can try to ignore that, but the body and the heart will always tell us when
Yeah,
something's up. We will have that anxiety and confusion.
Yeah.
exactly.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just like agreeing. That's so, so true.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up that book. I think there are a lot of things that we experience in life that we kind of just hold on to, and we hold on to it in our bodies. And so being able to ground ourselves and kind of release that, notice it and release it, um, would I could see that helping with resiliency. And I know that's something that you talk about a lot. Could you maybe expand on that a little bit more with resiliency and the body?
Yeah. So Dr. Bezel van der Kolk's book was one of the most powerful books for me because he did talk about how yoga could support, the resolution and healing of trauma. And I think one of the keys that he talks about, and that I've certainly experienced in my body and with working with students and clients, is that we learn that the discomfort has an arc to it. So whether we're in a yin pose, so in yin yoga, we hold the postures, for around 5 minutes. It could be much longer, it could be a little shorter, but you usually have an arc where you hit a peak where it's uncomfortable. You want to move. And you learn that if you stay and you hit that peak, you start coming down. It's the same thing with a lot of addiction research. They call it urge surfing. When that crest hits, that's when you want to do whatever your addictive pattern is or substance. And then it starts to go down. So I think one of the keys to resilience is being able to have the distress tolerance. We have to be able to handle our uncomfortable feelings and keep going. And I feel like that is key. And there is this quality in yoga, in the contemplative practice, as well as, with meditation and prayer, where we're often having to hold, two, maybe even conflicting emotions, such as grief and joy, or it could be sadness and strength. There's this idea that with our sense of equanimity, we can hold more than one feeling and not let any engulf us.
Yes, I love that. From a therapist background in dialectical behavioral therapy, we call it like riding the wave, right? Like, and so I never really thought about that in terms of how yoga can help teach that practice of, okay, like this is an intense feeling that we're feeling in this pose, and it's going to have a peak, and not one of the big things I think in trauma work is like m- we want to avoid the pain, right? And not avoiding the pain by coming out of the pose, but enduring the pain and coming out on the other side and knowing that like it will subside, the wave will subside. And I think that's a beautiful imagery of resilience. We have these things in our lives that are um, so hard, right? Like just really difficult things of and the nature of life. And um, as we come to that peak and knowing that it has to come down, it has to subside, and it will get better. There's so much hope in that too. I love that perspective.
Thank you.
You talk about moving from pain to possibility in building resiliency. Tell us more about your work in that.
Yeah, so I am so interested in how we transform our perspective. And I'm interested in it being rooted in the body. So there's a lot on, even cognitive behavioral therapy, you're working to change how you think about something. But I feel like the body is where it lives. So we have to change our physiology often in order to even begin to have that ability to transform our perspective. It's really hard if you're super upregulated to see things in a whole new way. And the reason that I have been really loving this phrase, from pain to possibility, is that I feel like there can be this. way where we want to jump from pain to happiness, which is beautiful. And if that works for someone, that's great. But for me, in my own journey and from my observation with my students, often we need a bridge. So if we are having the deepest heartbreak of our life, we've experienced tremendous grief, loss, disappointment. To jump from that devastating pain to happiness is kind of a leap. And possibility, I feel like feels more doable. There is a possibility that we will have an expanded perspective. And that is what lights me up is perspective shifting. And I'll use a image that I absolutely love. I think the first time I started using this image was at Harvard when I started to study resilience with Chris Berlin, who I know Jenna and I both studied with, and he taught a lot on resilience. Um, but I remember he'd give us case studies. And the thing I started to notice was this perspective shifting, this integrating of someone's most difficult story into a new lens. So I want to still give that image, but I'm going to give a little bit of background first. So one of the case studies I recall, and I might not have it perfectly, was this man lost his wife. His wife died in a car crash. And if I recall correctly, he was in the car too. So he survived and she died. And he was absolutely devastated in the case study. And then as a chaplain, we were, to begin to help him heal. So I started to think about it because that is so devastating. But in this case study, we saw little flickers. Like he was intrigued by mindfulness, he was intrigued by meditation. So that was like the little tiny window of light. That's like where the light was pouring in for him. And it's almost like when we're in that chaplain role, we want to expand the light because we have to integrate our most painful experiences into a new lens. So the image is of a stained glass window. So a stained glass window is made up of fractured glass. So it's all could be broken glass, even, right? It could be an incredibly beautiful sunrise made out of truly broken glass, or you might cut it if you're, if you make stained glass. My mom creates stained glass windows. So I love that because some of our stories have fractured glass, but if we can integrate them, it makes our hearts so much wider, deeper, more compassionate. We can help others. Usually people transform their deepest heartbreaks into something helpful, if they don't fall into the great abyss and stay there. So that is what really, really like lights me up, I'd say, in that idea of pain to possibility.
Yes, I love that imagery. Oh, hope it's okay that I share this. I'll be very careful about if this, if this family is listening. But I talked to Jenna. I just was like, oh, I got to be a chaplain this weekend. I got to put on my chaplain hat. So I'm a reservist, and so I go 1 month a year usually, but sometimes I get a call, and I got a call this week to kind of do some end of life care, and it had me thinking of like the holy horrible, like this like sacred, holy, spiritual moment of someone at the end of their life. And it was a very sudden thing. It wasn't, something anyone was prepared for. Um, and being as a chaplain, being in that moment with these people that you've never met and just jumping in and and supporting them through the holy horrible. And I think that imagery is so important because everyone, is feeling sad and lost and broken, but to be able to find light through that and see the sacredness of life and spirit and beauty and all of what life is and the meaning of life and everything that is the gift in that, and personally, like in my beliefs of the light of Christ that's in that, and just to be able to sit in that with them was such a blessing and um honor, privilege to sit in the holy horrible with them. And so I love that image of just the light through the brokenness. So thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for sharing that story. And I love that phrase. Is it the holy horrible?
The holy horrible. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, where is the holy still, even in the deepest suffering?
Yeah. And when we think about integration, this word you used describing the possibility of integration and what that integration can bring, how do we start helping people integrate? I mean, we know there's stages of grief. So I'm thinking in my own deepest grief, of deep experience of betrayal in my life. there have been phases of my suffering and integration, and that can take years, right? Years. So how do we start with people?
I love that question, Jenna. I feel like that's so accurate that often grief does cycle through. It's not like we just do one thing and then we're better. Maybe some, but I like the image of the labyrinth because we can think we're getting close to, say, our full healing, and then there might be another wave of intense grief. It could be hearing a song, it could be something else that happens in our life. Um, I think with integration, to me, it is an ongoing process. I feel that it's, for me, weaving in whatever that intense, painful experience is. So I'll use my own experience of heartbreak. Um, I think that that one has been super hard in my life. So loss of a deep love that I was with for many, many years. And I do feel like it was a process of integration. I think I had healed and then there'd be another wave that hit. But what I found was consistent, kind of going back to, um, like, connecting to the heart. I think a lot of integration happens when we feel our deepest suffering, our greatest heartbreak, our greatest loss. My dad also died when I was a child, so that was a big one too. Is when we can, uh, I don't want to say help, because I feel like in a way we're just hold space for someone to heal and connect to the holy, connect to the sacred, or sometimes what I call the inner healing intelligence. Like, I have a deep faith in God, but since, as we know in chaplaincy, we sometimes work with people that have all different beliefs, which makes it so rich. But it's this quality of really tapping into that healing intelligence. And I think with integration, it is when we are able to serve and help others, it really helps. There, it's making me think of this Viktor Frankl quote. I'm going to read it. I hope it won't make my image go away, but I'm going to pull it up. I should have it right here. So I have the quote by Viktor Frankl, and he writes in Man's Search for Meaning, in some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds meaning, such is the meaning of sacrifice. And in some ways, I feel like our painful experiences are like a sacrifice. And I think it can be a doorway to a deeper kind of wisdom. And I think that integration piece often happens and really has been really powerful for me when I feel like my deepest pain, in this case, like I highlighted my heartbreak, has been able to support others. It doesn't even have to be heartbreak, but knowing that level of suffering, where, at least in my case, I felt like it was like I was in a great abyss. And I truly had no idea how I get out. So it was a great opportunity to put into practice everything I had studied, because it was like, okay, let's try this out. Like, how is this going to work? And that's another thing I think is so important with integration, but also with dealing with pain, is to never give up. There's 1,000, maybe 1,000,000 different ways we could heal. It's not going to look the same for everyone. So not to judge ourselves if some, even, you know, trial tested way of healing doesn't work for us. Like, never give up is my mantra, I would say.
Yeah, I love that. And I love, there's a couple of things that came to mind as you were saying that. The first is a quote from, oh, I'm so bad at quoting people, so maybe I heard it at a chaplain conference, but it's our brokenness is what connects us as humans, like our brokenness connects us because when we have those moments of pain and we meet someone else that has had those moments of pain, we instantly are just like, we know, I know, we know that pain and we can heal and grow together in that and connect in that. And that's so beautiful that like us as human beings are all collectively sharing the human experience of joy, but also of pain, of deep pain and suffering. And we can support each other in that because we all experience pain at some point. So I love that that you said that. There was something else that I can't think of, but yeah, so yeah.
I love how you talk about how you said there are thousands or maybe 1,000,000 ways to
Mm.
heal. That is a very hopeful statement because it means that we can trust our own unfolding path of healing. We can trust that when we ground in the body and listen to the heart and know what is next, we'll be guided. And whether we call that guidance God or higher consciousness or the universe, I do believe that we are guided in our healing. And I know for my own healing after heartbreak, I always get the next right step. Like there's almost this synchronicity of people being sent to help me or me discovering a new form of therapy or a new tool. And so I just hope for anyone listening, if you're feeling overwhelmed, like where do I start in my healing journey? Maybe take a couple deep breaths and ask, like, where do I start? Ask your deep inner knowing, your higher power, if you have one, and you'll know where to start. So, what else is coming to your mind, Melissa, right now?
Well, exactly that. I think you said it so beautifully. Like we're guided to the next step. And I think that's a big one for even like just the challenges, any challenge in our life. Like usually our grief becomes engulfing, our overwhelm when we are trying to look 10 steps ahead. And especially when we're in like profound pain, getting out of bed and making a cup of tea is actually something we really want to cheer on, because that's, again, that little tiny bit of light pouring in. But the other image that came to me, I guess I really do think in images, is I walked the Camino de Santiago when I was many years ago, maybe 20 years ago now. I was maybe 18, 19. And uh, and we would see these yellow arrows. So the yellow arrows guide the pilgrim on this pilgrimage across Spain. So I started in France in the Pyrenees and then walked across northern Spain. I actually did it in 2 trips. But you follow these yellow arrows. And what I loved, especially being so young, I thought to myself, like, all I need to do is be able to see the next yellow arrow and the next one and the next one. And I remember at one point, the soles of my shoes even melted. So I had to duct tape them on because it was so hot. But again, I didn't know what I was going to do. But again, all I had to do was take one step. So I made it. And then someone gave me their Tevas, their extra shoes, their sandals. Um, and it all worked out. But if I had panicked, I may have stopped walking because that's kind of the big thing when the ground is over 100 degrees. So I'm fascinated by that, taking the next step. And that's sometimes all we can do, but that's sometimes all that's necessary when it feels super heavy or the fog is so dense that we can barely drive. So yeah, that was what was coming to me.
Thank you, Melissa. I think this next arrow is so helpful, especially for those who are really in the depth of it right now. Like sometimes, like when you are hit with deep grief and inexplicable suffering, yeah, to make a cup of tea, to get out of bed, to brush your teeth, to brush your hair, to get food somehow on the table feels like a Herculean effort, like each little step. And so if any of our listeners right now are in it where you're like, I can barely get out of bed. If I get out of bed today, that is a win. Like that's the next arrow, like getting out of bed. That's the arrow. And it will become less dense and less foggy with time. But right now, just know you're doing exactly what you need to do. Just getting out of bed. Just one little arrow. One more, one more.
Yeah, I think a lot of times too, especially in my work as a therapist, one of the biggest things I hear is, but I should be doing more. I should be able to function. It's been years. Why can't I get over this, And I the word should, I feel like should not be in our vocabulary. Like I just want to take it out sometimes because I feel like it's done more damage than any other word, but we are allowed to give ourselves time and permission to heal. We're allowed to value our healing in that time and give ourselves time and space to do what we need to do and to grow incrementally as inch by inch, day by day. And that's okay. That is absolutely okay. You don't, you're allowed to give yourself permission. We give you permission. You have permission from whoever you need to, get out of bed one time today, to brush your teeth and then come back to bed. And then the next day, try to brush your teeth and shower and then come back to bed. And then the next day, brush your teeth, shower and grab your tea. It's okay. It's okay to feel your feelings. It's okay to take little steps every single day in that healing process. And one day, you're going to look up and say, wow, I've come so far. And that's okay to honor that and rejoice in that. And if you have a day, if you feel like that's where you are now, but you have a day where you go back and you're like, you have a setback and you're hurting over that thing again, honestly, I feel like grief honors the experience because you remember that person that you lost or the time of your life or whatever it is, and it's holding space to honor that, to grieve it, and then to continue. And that's okay too. So yeah, I love that. I love that all being a part of the resilience wave that you were talking about. Yeah.
Dr. Vanderkolk talks about this in The Body Keeps the Score, is that there's no fixing trauma. We can't fix it. It's done. It has done damage. And so, Melissa, that's why I'm so moved by your phrase from pain to possibility. It's not from pain to fixing, not from pain to erasing the experience, not from pain to suddenly having that happiness that you talked about. It's the possibility that there is renewal, integration, increased resiliency, and room for further empathy for others and ourselves. And eventually, I do think for most people, joy is possible. Uh, Maybe not right now.
I love that. Yeah, I remember a chaplain shared with me at one point, it's okay to feel joy and grief at the same time. And that was one of those light bulb moments because I really didn't feel like my grief was ever going to go away. And I felt like when he said that, it helped open that window of possibility. It was like, oh, actually, I do have so much joy. I actually love life, and there's all this beauty every day. And it kind of gave me permission. It was almost like my pain. I couldn't let it go. But it was like, okay, I can hold both. And in that possibility, yeah, it's like a muddy jar of water. More water just kept getting poured in through my joy. And then the grief, it wasn't like occupying all the space or the way that the mud might fill up, a just shaken up glass jar. So, yeah, I think it's really powerful to, um, feel like we can hold both and make room for that possibility that light, I love that guiding light, that name of your podcast, and that joy will probably pour in greater and greater amounts as we keep going.
Melissa, that was so beautifully said. You truly are someone who embodies this practice. Thank you so much for joining us today. Listeners, if you would like to learn more from Melissa, please check out her work, her teaching schedule at yogatransformsus.com. And we invite you, wherever you are in your grieving journey or joy journey or both journey, to honor that place, to be there in the heart and to take the next step. Thank you so much for joining us on Guiding Light. I'm Jenna Carson,
I'm Sierra Larson.
and we hope you follow the peace.